A rare outburst of anger against you may be something you should let slide, although it would be wise to give a calm warning about such behavior. You know, there are times where we just need to let some things slide because our husbands are not perfect, and we do not need to be like the hall monitor saying, I caught you again, not being perfect once again. So there are times where we need to let some small things slide, but at the same time perhaps give a gentle, calm warning that we don't really tolerate that kind of behavior. The Bible verse that I'm looking at here is Proverbs 12:16. It says this: "Fools show their annoyance at once, but the prudent overlook an insult." Kind of interesting, isn't it? Fools show their annoyance at once, but the prudent overlook an insult. So if your husband doesn't have a pattern of raging against you, and he doesn't have this pattern of flying off the handle and saying all sorts of horrible things to you, and it's just kind of an isolated incident, do you think sometimes that's something that we can let slide to some extent? However, maybe still give a gentle warning, because the woman described in Proverbs 31, that noble wife, she's described as a woman that has dignity, and a woman of dignity does not allow herself to be treated poorly. So let's say your husband comes home from work, and he's usually a nice guy. Usually he's pretty pleasant, usually. But he comes home from work, walks through the door, slams the door, and says something not so nice to you, and you're like, whoa. Now, you could fly off the handle, but if we were to follow that proverb that I read a few moments ago, fools show their annoyance at once, but the prudent overlook an insult. If this is unusual behavior for him, maybe we just kind of let that slide a little bit. However, do you think we could give maybe like a calm warning? Because if we're women of dignity, we don't want to set it up that he thinks that we just tolerate this and just keep on doing this every day. I'm happy with that, right? So maybe we could say something like, "I'm not your enemy. I think you might have had a bad day, but don't talk to me like that." Or, "Please don't, that's not okay for you to say that to me. I understand you probably had a bad day, but please don't talk to me that way." If your husband has a pattern of directing anger toward you in a way that emotionally or physically injures you, he has become abusive and he is sinning against you. And hopefully this doesn't apply to anyone in the room, but it may. I just want to say it is never, ever okay with God for your husband to rage against you, verbally abuse you, physically abuse you. It is not okay with God. I wanted to share a couple of verses. God specifically tells husbands to be considerate to their wives and respectful. 1 Peter 3:7 says, "Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives and treat them with respect." It also goes on to say that if you don't, it's going to hinder your prayers. That's interesting. And then in Colossians 3:19, it says, "Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them." So when your husband is raging against you as a pattern of behavior, or verbally, emotionally abusing you as a pattern of behavior, or certainly if he's physically abusing you, this is not okay with God. It is not to be tolerated. If your husband has a pattern of anger that has reached the level of emotional abuse, then follow the instructions of Jesus in Matthew 18, verses 15 through 17. And in this passage, basically Jesus tells you to confront the person who is doing whatever the thing is that's sinning against you. And you'll want to do this. And now, if it's physical abuse, you do not probably want to confront your husband. You want to get help. I'm talking mostly about emotional abuse right now, or controlling behavior. If you feel safe in confronting your husband, confront him. Say, this has been going on and it's not acceptable. I need you to stop doing whatever these behaviors are. If he listens, Jesus says, then you've won them over. If he will not listen, then you go and you bring in other people, like a pastor, like a counselor. You bring in more people trying to bring some pressure on him to change. But also the reason that you bring in the other people is to make sure that you understand that it really is inappropriate behavior. You almost need that validation, because sometimes we're too close and we can't even see it clearly. But an outside opinion, a counselor or pastor can look at the situation more clearly and say, yeah, that's not acceptable. That's not okay. Okay, principle number 7. Realize that a display of anger toward you often has little or nothing to do with you, but is caused by your husband's own personal issues. And this is a big aha moment, really, because sometimes we take it as like, it's direct, yeah, it might be directed at you, but it's usually not even about you. It's because he has personal issues. Some of those personal issues would be stress, frustration, feeling inadequate or not good enough, feeling disrespected is a huge one for men. If he's feeling disrespected by you, if he's feeling disrespected at work, if he's feeling disrespected in his church, if he's feeling disrespected in his family of origin, whatever, that is just so wounding for men that often, and for men, when they get wounded, it often comes out as anger. For women, when we get wounded, sometimes it comes out as anger, but often we just retreat inside and become depressed, and we kind of, it turns inward. For a lot of men, it becomes an outward, like aggressive thing when they're wounded. So disrespect is a huge one. Maybe he has disappointment in himself or shame. Maybe he has unhealed father wounds. Maybe he does have selfish desires that are being blocked by you or someone else. And that's why he's, getting angry, because he really does just have selfish desires. Even though you need not tolerate anger outbursts towards you, a wife should evaluate her own behavior to see if she wrongly contributed to her husband's escalation of anger. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we need to tolerate and it's okay for them to be angry, but sometimes we really do need to look at ourselves and say, ooh, did I pour gas on the fire, right? And how do we do that? By treating him disrespectfully, right? By maybe questioning all of his decisions, badgering him to do the things the way that we think is best or on our timeline, badgering, constant criticism, saying hurtful things to him during conflict, refusing to allow breathing room for him to think during a disagreement. This is a big one for women. We think really quick. We can verbalize really quick. And when they don't do it, we're like, rah, rah, rah. And they just want you to just go away because they need to process. So sometimes we throw fuel on the fire because we're like wanting to get them to disagree with us and we're kind of pressing and they aren't ready to do that. They need some time to process.